Hiring your first employee is exciting and terrifying. It can make your life so much easier, but if you do it the wrong way, like I did, it will make your life so much harder. In this video, I'm going to be sharing the 7 most brutal lessons I learned when growing from a one-man army in my business to hiring a very small team. My first hire was my friend, and we haven't actually spoken since he quit over a year ago. If you're still doing everything yourself and you're thinking of hiring someone soon, then watch this video to make sure that you can avoid the same mistakes that I made. Now, the first lesson I learned is possibly the most obvious one, and that is just don't hire friends and family. My first employee, he was a close friend. I thought the trust and the banter would make it smooth, but business puts pressure on relationships. Even though we actually also had a previous working relationship where I was his boss at a previous job we both worked. When things got stressful, he missed deadlines, there was poor communication, and he wasn't doing what I was asking him to do. It was almost impossible to separate that friendship from the business relationship that we now had. And whilst, like I mentioned, I did have a previous working relationship with him, it was so much different when it was actually my business, and any mistake he was making was impacting my bottom line. And I think just the biggest lesson that I learned here is just don't hire anyone that you're emotionally invested in. So if I was gonna hire my first employee again, then I would definitely make sure that I would be hiring someone that I can evaluate objectively based on their merits and based on their job performance. And if I was gonna hire a friend, then I would absolutely make sure that there was a solid relationship before that, and also that they had a similar ambition in life to me, because I think looking back, the biggest mismatch between the two of us is my ambition was so much higher than his that he was actually never going to work out working with me, because I would expect too much from him being my friend as well as my employee. Now, the second thing I learned is actually that first employee relationship is just plain weird. Imagine this, you're sat in a 2-man office and there's just 2 of you there, and somehow you have to be able to talk enough and stay friendly enough to be able to spend 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week with just this one other person. Yet on the flip side to that, you still have to be their boss and they have to be able to answer to you. For me, looking back, and this ties into that lesson number 1, this was one of my biggest fears going into my first hire, which I think is one of the biggest reasons why I decided to hire my friend, because then it just wouldn't be that awkward when we were sat together for 8 hours a day. So I think actually the biggest lesson around this is that you need to be able to find someone who you genuinely get on well enough with to be able to create that relationship where you're able to spend all of that time together, yet not lose that so important relationship of the boss and the employee. Now, other ways around this is actually, if you're looking at hiring your first employee, then maybe even consider hiring someone remotely and then just having regular check-ins, whether it be via a phone call or a Zoom call, or maybe they have to come down and visit the office once a week. This could also potentially help you save on office fees as well, because if there's just 2 of you and you're both working from home, there is actually no need to have a physical office, which can become really expensive. Another thing that can really help this boss-employee relationship, especially in the early days when you're working together so closely, is actually just making sure that you have regular scheduled check-ins, and then also making sure that you keep setting your expectations with them, because then it's always reinforcing in their mind that you are their boss and not just the person that they're chatting to all day, every day in the office. So if I was actually going to hire my first employee again, then to be totally honest, I would actually do it completely different, and I would not be hiring someone in person as my first teammate. I would probably wait until I need a couple of people that were actually needed to be in-house, but of course I would definitely rather build my team out remotely. Now, the next thing I learned is actually that commitment goes both ways. So again, I hired my friend, and the way that I was paying him was as a contractor. I didn't enroll him on a PAYE scheme. I didn't have him enrolled in a pension contribution scheme either. And I wanted him to care. I wanted him to go the extra mile, stay late, do jobs that I'm asking him to do, cover me when I went on holiday for a week. So I was expecting this full bought in, this full loyalty from this guy, yet I wasn't doing the same to him, and I wasn't giving him the commitment and probably the job security from my end to actually make it worthwhile for him. Another big mistake that I actually made around that subject of commitment with him is that I actually don't think I quite paid him enough. So the pay rate I decided to give him was actually pretty much exactly the same as the previous job that he had just left. And my argument at the time was, I'm a small business, that's a massive company, so the fact that I can pay you the same and you're working with your friend all day, and let's be honest, I probably don't even need to finish explaining that. You can see for yourself what the problem was right there. So the biggest lesson that I learned here is that you can't expect someone else to treat your business like it is their own unless you really treat them as they're part of it. Now, maybe you could do this by offering them a profit share or a share scheme, or at least employ them as a full employee and really pay them what they're worth, and maybe even tie in some performance bonuses in there as well. So if you're unsure about hiring your first employee, you just need to commit either way. Don't do what I done where I made a half hire. You need to either hire someone fully or don't hire at all. Now, if you're looking for more of a contractor, then again, we can go back to that remote working, because there are plenty of online contractors, usually in countries where salaries are so much lower, so they expect a lower salary anyway, and you can actually get a really good contractor for much cheaper than it would cost you to hire someone fully in person. And finally on this subject, if you are going to be hiring someone, especially hiring someone properly in person, make sure there is a fixed contract in place, and especially with clear defined job roles, which I will get onto later in this video. The next thing I learned is just don't hire someone who just wants a job, especially if you're an ambitious entrepreneur who's trying to build the next big thing. Like I alluded to earlier, my first employee really wasn't about business, and he wasn't about really growing and making as much money as he could, which is unlike what I'm like. For me, I'm happy to sacrifice today to build myself and my family a better tomorrow. So with my first employee, he showed up on time. He mostly done the work that was needed to be done by him. And then every day at actually like 10 to 5, he was packing up his stuff, ready to be out the door, bang on 5 o'clock on the dot, or even a couple of minutes before if he could get away with it. And there was me slaving away way into the evening, trying to build my future, trying to build my business. Now, this totally ties in with my previous point about fully committing to someone, because if I had fully committed to him and fully explained what I wanted of him, then maybe this could have been different from the word go. One thing that I really learned with this is that your first hire will really set the tone for your business going forward. And if you hire someone who's passive and just wants a job, then that really could embed into your business and your company culture in the long term and potentially damage what you want to build. So before hiring, make sure you ask yourself, what is the culture you want to build? Are you trying to build more of a hustle culture? I'm sure we've all heard the stories of what Elon Musk done when he bought Twitter, or X as it's now known, and he's making people work stupidly long hours. He fired half the staff, but because he's trying to build something properly. And if you're in that same sort of thing of trying to build the next big thing, then hiring a bunch of passive 9-to-5ers who just want to do their 8 hours, and if they can go home a minute earlier, then they'll take it every single day, even if the job is not done. That is not who you want. So when you're looking for your first employees, you need to be looking for someone who's energized by the company mission and can feel the energy coming out of you, and they're reciprocating that back to you when you're first interviewing them. Also, just asking them, are they excited about the business and what excites them about it in particular? And maybe you can even test their initiative with an introduction task before you actually fully hire them. And even if this means that you have to pay them for a day or a partial day to see what they're like, then maybe that is an investment very well made, even if you don't end up hiring them. Now, the next lesson I learned was actually something that I kind of already knew, and if anyone's ever read the E-Myth Revisited, then you'll probably know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, make sure you go and read that book after you've watched this video. So when I hired my first employee, I basically gave him a lot of the jobs that I didn't want to do. And as much as I tried to keep a very clear defined role, there was some extra jobs that I gave him just because I thought it wasn't worth my time. And this ended up in him having a complete mishmash of roles and not a clearly defined job. So then when things weren't done, it's because he didn't really realize that was part of his job, because he'd be working over in this section of the business 1 minute and then he'd go to the complete other side. So I literally gave him everything I didn't want to do. So whether that was packing orders, speaking to customers, managing my affiliates on TikTok Shop, and even some really important tasks such as approving creator samples for my TikTok Shop. So there was no real structure and he was dropping balls. There was multiple times where in a week he didn't even check the free samples once, and they expire after 7 days. So then we missed out on some really good creators potentially getting free samples of our product to then go and promote on the TikTok platform. I'm sure you can imagine as an e-commerce business, this was a huge hit to not have this done, and also then for me to not check. And it was when I started checking these things more often and realizing, and then I was messaging him, that's when the relationship started to break down, because I didn't set my clear expectations from the start, along with giving him way too many different things to try and juggle, and he wasn't able to keep up on it because he didn't know what to prioritize. So when you are hiring, you do just need to make sure that you are hiring for one clear defined role. So for me, it probably should have been I was either hiring someone for my order fulfillment, or maybe some of my admin jobs that were clear and strict and all followed down the same sort of path, not spread across multiple platforms, multiple different things such as customer service and then creator management, etc. So the next thing I learned is actually, if I'm totally honest, still something that I struggle with to this day, and that is letting go of control. If you're hiring someone, you need to be able to let go. You need to allow them to make mistakes, and as long as it doesn't completely break your business, then the mistakes are going to be worth it in the long run. Because one of the things that I've definitely found since hiring my second and third employee and so on is actually that if you allow these people to make mistakes, the chances of them doing it again is so slim that it's actually worth them doing it in the first place, especially when you're smaller, because if there is a financial implication, say for example, for me, it might have been that one of my employees caused us to run out of stock or something, where we're doing less money, say last year, than we are this year, it's actually costing me less to have that mistake last year rather than having that mistake then creep up this year and maybe even multiple times over. So if you keep micromanaging, you will continue to be the bottleneck of your business, and hiring your first employee is all about making sure is that you're not the bottleneck to your business anymore. So the best way to do things to actually allow yourself to let go is to create standard operating procedures, or looms, about how to do things. So standard operating procedures can literally just be some kind of Word document, PDF list of how to do something. Maybe it's a step-by-step guide if it's something that is a very step-by-step task, or maybe it just has to be more of a general overview. Now, looms can be something for more of a slightly more complicated task, or for me, I always make sure I do looms or videos about how to complete a task when it's really important. Say like something along the lines of filling out customs declarations for when we ship goods off across the world. Now for me, that is such an important task, and I don't want anyone to have to pay the wrong tax, whether that's me or even when we're sending orders out to a customer. We need to make sure that we are fulfilling our tax duties properly as a business. So that is a really important thing, and for me, that's not something I'd want to put in a standard operating procedure, whereas I'd put it in a loom, because then you can explain in so much more detail about how to do it. And yes, it might take slightly longer at first for your employee to watch a video rather than read a 1-page or 2-page document on how to do something. In the long run, it should pay absolute dividends to you. So even if you're not the most comfortable in recording videos on camera or speaking on camera, then it is definitely something that you need to learn to get comfortable with, because it's such an important skill to have in the early days, is being able to really set those standards for people. Now, once you have made these standard operating procedures and looms, do be open to people doing things slightly differently. For me, at first, when I hired some of my later employees, I was so fixated on they need to do things my way, but actually we both got to the exact same result by them slightly tweaking it in a way that works better for them. And at first, I really found this hard to let go and really was trying to make them follow my way. But over time, I've realized that if you get to the same required outcome, then it doesn't matter if they change some steps very slightly. I think as long as they're doing it 90% of the way that you want it, then they can change that last 10%, because they might even have a better idea than you, and by giving them that little bit of free rein, you're allowing them to bring their creativity into your business, which is only going to help you grow further and learn more yourself. Now, sometimes this obviously will not work and they will make mistakes, and they probably should have just followed your way, but that is just when you need to then give feedback and go again. Always make sure you give feedback. It's so important, and make sure to always over communicate with your employee, which happily brings us on to our last point of this video, which is actually over communicate everything. Now, my dad actually has a saying, and that is, assumptions are the mother of all fuck ups. ups. So there was many times where I assumed that he knew what I meant by things when he really didn't. Now, you could say that he should have just asked me, and sometimes I definitely fell victim to actually having that mindset within myself when he wouldn't actually pick up what I was telling him to do correctly because I hadn't fully explained everything. I would push the blame onto him, whereas actually the blame was fully with myself, and I only realized that a little while after he actually left. You really need to make sure you are setting your expectations, whether that's timelines or quality or workflows. Make sure you have it set. A lot of the time, having that set in writing, whether that be in an email or a message, is probably a very good idea because then they have something to refer back to. Whereas if you're just doing it in a two-way conversation, then they can easily forget. So if you are having a two-way conversation, then sometimes I've found more recently that it can help to then follow that up with an email, basically outline everything that you spoke about. Assuming that your employee will know things that to you seem obvious is the worst thing you can possibly do. Now, for me, when I hired my first employee, I was in business for about 2.5 years. So what would seem obvious to me is not going to seem obvious to someone who had never done it before. And I think now, thinking back, if I had been given the same direction when I first started, which is nearly 4 years ago at this point, I probably would have made a lot of the same mistakes that he made. So over communication, whilst sometimes it may get a little bit annoying, maybe for the pair of you, because you might be feeling you're sending too many emails and they might be thinking that you're giving them too much information. Sometimes you have to over communicate so you can find what the right level is. It's probably better to strip back your communication than not have enough communication to start with. So hiring changed my business, but more than that, it changed me. I had to stop being the scrappy solo guy who did everything and start building a proper business, a proper company that other people could thrive in other than just myself. If you're thinking about hiring your first employee, then it is worth taking the time to set things up properly. Make sure you learn from my mistakes so you don't have to make them yourselves, because I think that first employee interaction definitely set back my business by at least 6 months. And if you did find this video helpful, then check out this video on the end screen, as this might help grow your business even further.